Hi there, this is the second episode in our four-part journey through the 9 realms of Norse mythology. Let's go! After the clash of fire and ice gave birth to the cosmos, the myth turns its gaze to the stage where the great stories actually happen. These are the main campaign realms: Asgard, Midgard, Jötunheim, and Helheim. Think of them as the core map of Norse mythology. If the creation realms are the background lore, these are the active levels where the sagas unfold. They are the battlegrounds of gods and giants, and the everyday world of human life and death. At the center of the Norse cosmos lies Midgard, the middle enclosure. It was imagined as a fortified realm, fenced off from chaos, the dwelling place of humankind, carved out between divine order and untamed wilderness. The very word echoes the Norse experience of life. Farms fenced against wolves, halls walled against raids, communities ringed by boundaries that held back danger. Midgard was the mythic name for the human world, a place of order set at the center of the 9 realms. Its creation was tied to the slaying of the primordial giant Ymir by Odin and his brothers Vili and Ve. From Ymir's immense body, the cosmos was shaped, the earth from his flesh, mountains from his bones, seas and rivers from his blood, the dome of the sky from his skull, and the clouds from his brains. Midgard itself was defined more narrowly, a fortified region within creation, raised as a dwelling for humanity. To guard it, the gods built a protective wall from Ymir's eyebrows. According to Gylfaginning, within this enclosure, the gods created the first humans. Along the seashore, they found 2 trees, Asker and Embla. Odin gave them spirit and life. Vili gave them thought and feeling. Ve gave them form, speech, hearing, and sight. These 2 became the ancestors of all humankind, destined to labor, fight, love, and die. Their origin from trees tied them symbolically to the natural world, rooted and fragile, yet resilient enough to withstand storms. Above Midgard lay Asgard, connected to the human realm by the shimmering bridge Bifrost, guarded by Heimdall. To the east stretched Jötunheim, the land of giants pressing constantly against Midgard's borders. Beneath it lay Helheim, the realm of the dead. Encircling it entirely was the great ocean, within which lurked Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent. Jörmungandr was one of Loki's monstrous children, cast into the sea by Odin. There it grew so large that it encircled the entire world, biting its own tail. The serpent symbolized more than danger. It was the endless horizon and the cycle of time. For Norse seafarers venturing into waters that seemed without end, the thought of Jörmungandr circling just beyond sight must have felt close at hand. At Ragnarok, the serpent will uncoil, rise from the ocean, and poison sea and sky. Thor will slay it, but only walk 9 steps before falling dead from its venom. Defender and destroyer perish together, an image of Norse fatalism, where even victory carries death in its shadow. Life in Midgard was always struggle, to farm poor soil, to sail treacherous seas, to endure winter, hunger, and war. And like everything else in the Norse cosmos, Midgard was not eternal. At Ragnarok, it would fall, consumed by fire and flood. Yet this transience did not lessen its importance. Midgard embodied the heart of the Norse worldview. That meaning lies not in permanence, but in struggle, courage, and fleeting triumph. High above the world of men rose Asgard, the enclosure of the Aesir gods, a divine stronghold of golden halls and lofty palaces. Like Midgard, it was imagined as a fortified space, surrounded by a wall raised on a higher plane, a realm of order, law, and sacred custom, in sharp contrast to the chaos beyond. Within those walls lay plains, rivers, and a constellation of divine halls, each reflecting the god who dwelled there. Odin ruled from Valaskjalf, roofed in silver, seated on the high throne, Hlidskjalf, from which he could see into all the worlds. His most famous hall was Valhall, later known as Valhalla, where warriors chosen by the Valkyries feasted until Ragnarok. Half of the heroic dead, however, went not to Odin, but to Freya, who welcomed them into Folkvangr. Thor's Bil Skirnir, the largest of all halls, towered in his land of Thrudvangur, while Frigg dwelled in Fensalir, a hall of mist and marsh. Baldur's Breidablik was said to be so pure that nothing unclean could exist within it, and Forseti judged disputes in Glitnir, the shining hall of justice. Heimdall kept vigil in Himinbjörg, stationed at the end of Bifrost, ready with his horn. Even the sea god Njörður had his dwelling, Nóatún, built by the shore, and the goddess Skadi lived in Thrymheimr, a legacy from her giant father. Each hall was more than a house. It was a world in miniature, the god's essence made visible in architecture. The walls of Asgard, according to myth, were built by a giant in disguise, who labored until the fortress stood nearly complete before his true identity was revealed. The sources also recall the war with the Vanir, a conflict so fierce that Asgard itself was scarred and later rebuilt, a reminder that divine order, though exalted, could fracture and be remade. The enclosure was a fortress, but also a constant frontier under threat. In Norse thought, to live in Asgard, within the fence, was to live within civilization. To be Utgard, outside the fence, was to be in the wilderness, where law gave way to raw power. Asgard embodied the principle of being within, a radiant, ordered stronghold raised high above the uncertainty that pressed in from every side. At the heart of this divine realm stretched Bifrost, the rainbow bridge linking Asgard to Midgard. It was the only path between humans and gods, guarded by Heimdall, whose eternal watch symbolized divine protection, but also revealed its fragility. For when Ragnarok comes, the fire giants will storm across Bifrost, shattering it, and carry destruction straight into the enclosure of the gods. Asgard was also the stage of the myths that set destiny in motion. It was here that Baldur the Beautiful was slain, an event that foretold the twilight of the gods. Here too, the monstrous wolf Fenrir was captured and taken to the island of Lyngvi in the lake Amsvartnir, where he was bound with Gleipnir until the world's end, destined to break free and devour Odin. And it was here that the hosts of the slain gathered in Valhalla and Folkvangr, awaiting the final battle for glory and doom. The sources themselves describe Asgard unevenly. The poetic Edda often speaks of its halls, but rarely of Asgard as a whole, as if the gods' dwellings were realms in themselves. The prose Edda, by contrast, gives elaborate detail, but refracted through Snorri Sturluson's Christian lens. He even identified Asgard with Troy, imposing classical geography on Norse myth, and described higher heavens, Andlangr and Vidblain, meant to house the elves after Ragnarok. These additions reflect medieval imagination as much as ancient tradition, blending old myth with newer, imported ideas. Symbolically, Asgard was the mirror of Midgard, a higher plane where order, wisdom, and rulership reigned. It was the cosmic council chamber, where the fates of gods and men alike were decided. Yet even this radiant fortress was not eternal. When Ragnarok arrives, its walls will fall, its halls will burn, and its golden order will be consumed in fire and ruin. For all its height and brilliance, Asgard was only one moment in the great cycle, a shining stronghold destined, like all things, to pass into ash. This video is the second in a 4-part series on the Nine Realms. In this episode, we'll explore the second group, the main campaign realms. If you're enjoying this content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next parts. In the video description, you'll find complimentary information about the series, including some of the most important books used as references, as well as a link to our website, where a full essay on the topic is available for purchase. Now, on to the video. If Midgard is the safe enclosure, Jötunheim is the outside. In the sources, the realm of the Jötnar, the giants, is usually called Jötunheimar, in the plural. Out of 31 references across the Eddas, 30 use the plural form. Only once do we see the singular. This tells us something crucial. Jötunheim was never imagined as a single bounded kingdom, but as a collection of giant lands, scattered and diverse, stretching beyond the safe enclosures of gods and men. The Jötnar, often translated as giants, are not merely oversized beings. They embody the raw forces of nature, mountains, storms, seas, and primordial chaos itself. Sometimes they appear as monstrous, sometimes nearly indistinguishable from humans, sometimes as keepers of ancient wisdom. The plural form of Jötunheim reflects this diversity. Not a single world, but many domains of wilderness where these beings dwell. Geographically, Jötunheim lies to the east of Midgard, across rivers and wild forests, extending into the vastness of Utgard, the outer enclosure. Utgard is less a realm than a concept, everything that lies beyond the fence of human settlement and divine order. To the Norse imagination, staring at distant mountains or into endless forests could feel like staring directly into Jötunheim itself. Deep woods filled with predators, high peaks where winter never loosened its grip, and watery expanses that defied crossing. Amid this wilderness rose the fortresses of the giants, the halls of their kings. One of the most famous is that of Thrymr, the frost giant who stole Thor's hammer, demanding Freya as his bride in exchange. In the poem Thrymskvida, Thor and Loki disguise themselves and travel into Jötunheim to retrieve the weapon. Other tales tie Jötunheim to the weaving of destiny. In Völuspá, 3 giant maidens come out of Jötunheim to advise the gods, shaping the creation of dwarves and the order of the cosmos. In Skirnismal, Freyr spies the giantess Gerdr from afar and is consumed with desire. Their union, brokered by threats and bargains, becomes one of the defining marriages between god and giant. Even Loki, the great trickster, is of Jotun heritage, a reminder that the line between Aesir and giants is not absolute but porous. Jötunheim is also the setting of profound encounters with wisdom. Beneath the root of Yggdrasil that stretches into this land lies Mimir's well of wisdom, where Odin sacrificed one of his eyes in exchange for knowledge. From this act, he became Odin One-Eye, the god who sees not just with sight, but with insight. This myth reminds us that the giants are not only adversaries, they are also keepers of secrets older than the gods themselves. The relationship between gods and giants is therefore ambivalent. The myths describe endless battles, Thor charging into the east, hammer raised to crush his enemies. And yet they also tell of kinship, marriage, and exchange. Bestla, Odin's own mother, was a giantess. Without the giants, even the Aesir could not exist. In this way, Jötunheim is not simply the enemy's realm, but the necessary counterpart to Asgard, a mirror in which the gods define themselves, and a reservoir of wisdom they cannot do without. In the end, Jötunheim stands as both a geographical neighbor and a symbolic other. Its plural nature, the Jötunheimar, reflects the scattered, diffuse wilderness that pressed against the boundaries of human life. For the Norse, who lived in small enclosures carved from forest and fjord, the world beyond the fence was always threatening, always alive with danger, but also rich in untamed power. Jötunheim was the mythic name for that frontier, the realm where chaos lived, wisdom hid, and the balance between order and wildness was forever tested. Finally, the most somber of the 4, Helheim. The underworld in Norse mythology is not a single uniform idea, but a plural one. In the sources it appears as Hel, Nifel, or, in later traditions, Helheim. Although the names vary, all designate the land of the dead, ruled by the goddess Hel, daughter of Loki and the giantess Angrboda. From a linguistic perspective, the name Hel comes from Proto-Germanic holjo, meaning that which is hidden. It is linked to words of concealment and shelter, not originally to suffering. The compound Helheim, home of Hel, seems to have emerged later, derived from the goddess's own name. In Snorri's Edda, Hel is cast into Niflheim by Odin and given authority over 9 worlds of the dead. Her realm lies beneath Midgard, tied to the 3rd root of Yggdrasil, which stretches down into its depths. It is associated with Hvergelmir, the primordial spring where Nidhöggr gnaws at the roots of the world tree, and with Nastrund, the corpse shore, where oathbreakers and criminals suffer. These places are not always consistently linked, but together they form the Norse imagination of the deep underworld. Hel receives those who did not die a glorious death in battle, men and women who died of illness, old age, or misfortune. This distinction is crucial. While Valhalla and Folkvangr welcomed warriors chosen by Odin and Freya, the vast majority of the dead journeyed to Hel. To reach it, they had to cross the river Gjöll via the Gjallarbrú, a golden-roofed bridge guarded by the stern maiden Modgudr, who questioned all who passed. Some traditions also mention the hound Garmr, chained before the cave of Gnipahellir, as guardian of the path to Hel, a role reminiscent of Cerberus in Greek myth, though the Norse sources never draw the comparison. Guardians of the underworld, however, are a cross-cultural motif, suggesting a shared Indo-European pattern. Descriptions of Helheim vary. In Baldur's Draumar, Hel prepares seats and banquets to welcome the god Baldur, suggesting a continuation of earthly life, eating, drinking, and socializing. Snorri, by contrast, paints a much bleaker picture. Hel dwells in a hall called El-Jötunheim, stormy, with high walls, a threshold named Falandaforad, falling to peril, a bed called Kur, sick bed, curtains of Blitjandabol, gleaming misfortune, a dish named Hunger, and a knife called Famine. Scholars often see this dark moralizing tone as influenced by Christianity, which reshaped Hel into a kind of Norse hell. Older sources are more neutral, portraying the underworld as a simple continuation of existence. The myth of Baldur's death highlights this ambiguity. After Baldur is slain, Odin's son Hermodr rides to Hel to ransom him. Hel agrees, but only if all things in the world weep for Baldur. Everything does, except for Thuk, often Loki in disguise. And so, Baldur remains in Hel until Ragnarok. In the end, not even the tears of the world could break her hold. A reminder that once Hel claims a soul, release is nearly impossible. The custom of burying the dead with weapons, food, and personal belongings reflects the belief that life continued after death, requiring the same resources as in life. This practice, common among Germanic and Scandinavian peoples, may have reinforced the idea of the underworld as a subterranean realm, though it is impossible to know whether the ritual shaped the myth or the myth justified the ritual. Helheim, then, should not be seen solely as a place of punishment, but as the inevitable destiny of most people. Not even Baldur, the purest of the gods, escaped its embrace. Hel is not just a goddess, but a force woven into the cycle of existence. At Ragnarok, the dead will march from her halls under Loki's command. This conception echoes the cultural reality of Viking Age Scandinavia. Harsh winters and high mortality shape daily life. Few lived to old age. Famine, disease, and plague claimed many. Helheim was not punishment, but the simple reality of death, ever present, as close as the next grave mound, lying beneath the earth as constantly as the forests and fjords above. Taken together, these four realms, Asgard, Midgard, Jötunheim, and Helheim, form the spine of Norse mythology. They are the stage where most stories unfold, the living map on which gods, humans, and monsters meet their fate. The main campaign realms embody human reality in cosmic form: the fence and the wild, the hall and the grave, the order of gods and the chaos pressing at their borders. If the creation realms provide the backdrop, then these four are the story itself, the central stage on which existence plays out, where courage and struggle gave meaning to life before the end. That's all for now. If you enjoyed this dive into the 9 realms, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss our next journey. See you in the next video. Bye.